The NBA offseason is officially, I guess you could say, underway with the NBA draft just finishing up. So I'm going to go ahead and give my grades out for the NBA draft, the both first and second round. I had first round grades on Instagram that I posted, but I'm just going to do a full kind of in-depth team grade for all the players that they got. Of course, a lot of undrafted free agents are going to be signed and everything, so I can't get all of them, but I watched a ton of college basketball this year. I followed a lot, so I followed a lot of these players, and I tried to go in depth on a lot of the foreign players as well, because there were a lot of them in this draft class. The class was, not as well known, I would say, this year, but I think it's deeper in comparison to other years. So while the top may not be as heavy, I think just throughout the entire draft, there's just going to be a lot of players that probably just going to stick in the NBA for a good amount of time, at least more than average in terms of just the general lifespan of an average NBA player or bench player or starter. And there'll probably be a lot of help from this draft class that I think a lot of winning teams are going to want, especially guys in the second round and guys that might be signed undrafted. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get into the rankings. Starting with the number one overall pick, the Atlanta Hawks. They won the lottery. I think they had like a 3% chance or something like that. It was one of the lowest of winning the lottery, and they did. Congrats to them. And they stood there, and they took forward Zachary Rizache out of France. And in my kind of post I made, I gave it like a C+ or so. He's like not a bad prospect at all. He's 19. He's got good size, 6'8". I think he's like 195, close to 200 pounds. He's a very good connecting piece that just kind of fits, but he's just not really like a number one overall pick, to be honest. And I do think there's a 100% chance that there will be players that were drafted below him that will be better. They just will be. It was just, hey, who are they? That was kind of the question, and a lot of teams didn't really know, and there's obviously going to be some teams that end up finding that out and getting pretty lucky there. But I think, they looked at potential trades, and it was just they're kind of stuck making this pick because Alex Sarr, who ended up going number 2, never met with them, seemed to not want to be there, which some people were confused by and everything, which I think it's kind of just, hey, they have a bunch of big men and centers. They have Onyeka Okongwu, who hasn't been able to start because they just keep getting Clint Capella. The team is kind of stuck in limbo in the middle, and they have Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, who just don't work together and are under 500 when playing with each other. So he probably just looked at all that and was like, hey, I want to go to a young team that's kind of building and ready to kind of, get this young movement started. So that's probably why he preferred to go there. But just going back to this Atlanta pick, like I said, I think they're kind of stuck doing this because, all these other teams know what the class is. So I don't think they needed to trade up to number 1 because they're like, nah, there's a bunch of guys we have on our list because it was so varied. Like a player could go 5 or drop down to like 25. That's how varied this class was because it was all very close. But Rizache is not bad. He is a very good connecting piece. Like we said, he can shoot, which is ideal, obviously, for a 6'8" player. That's kind of the modern NBA. He's long, so he can defend. His profile didn't really seem like he was some kind of stellar defender, so maybe not particularly like insane, but he's definitely capable. And he can dribble. He's not just a spot-up guy. He can create his own. But he, in terms of passing, he had like a 0.5 assist-to-turnover ratio, which is not great. And he did not shoot well at the rim. He shot under 40% at the rim, and that really concerns me as well. So, he's got upside, obviously. He's not just a proven product, but I just don't think he's ever going to really reach some kind of heights that a number 1 overall pick should. And I don't think he's going to bust either, but I just think it's kind of disappointing for them to get the number 1 overall pick and this be who they have. And then they had Nikola Jursic, who is probably just going to be a draft and stash wing for them. And I did a tiny bit on him, didn't do a ton, so I don't just want to throw out random stuff I don't really know. So I saw a majority. It was kind of just, hey, solid second round pick. This is kind of what they do. But I think their overall grade, I'm going to give them a C just for the whole draft. I think, just making the move at number 1, who's a connecting piece, is fine, but I kind of, I want them to pick a decision. Like, they want to win, I think, but I don't think they're in the position right now to win because of just the way the roster is constructed with the guards just don't seem to match. And, when they were healthy, they had issues. They were below 500 when both of their 2-star players that they had were playing on the same court together. And when they were off, they were better alone. So one of them's probably got to go. And I guess Riza Shea will just stay there for the ride and be a fine piece there. But I'm going to go ahead and give him a C. They end up obviously having the last pick in the first round, and they selected Baylor Shireman, wing out of Creighton, and I really liked the pick. I thought it was an A. He fell a little bit farther than I thought he would just because of his age. That's pretty much it. He's great for a winning team right now. He's a proven shooter. He can hit it from literally anywhere. He can handle and rebound. He's not just a sit in the corner guy. He's older and is a limited athlete, but he's kind of literally similar to the guard they have right now in Peyton Pritchard. Like, he's a bigger Peyton Pritchard, basically. Peyton Pritchard's kind of their point guard they have. And I think this is just great for a team that wants to try and get a two-peat, or a repeat as champion. This is the picks that you make for that to happen and increase your bench and shooting. So that's great for them. And then Anton Watson, didn't see him as a draftable player, but it's fine. Not a big deal. It was 54. So I'm going to go ahead and give him an A-. I'm a little bit higher. I think it's great they got a contributor right now for cheap. And, they didn't get a ton outside of that, but that's fine. They're trying to win right now. That's okay. Next year is probably one of the few years they're going to be able to do this because they were able to make this team kind of in spite of a lot of the salary stuff that went on. So they were I don't want to just fully put it up to luck, but they did get kind of fortunate that a lot of the salary stuff happened, and then they were able to take advantage of, having all these players like Porzingis and Drew Holiday and Derek White being paid. Obviously he's worth more than his money is now, and that was a great deal for them. But after this season, they're gonna have to they're gonna lose players basically. So this upcoming 2025 year for the Celtics is huge if they want to try and get another title in with the great team that's around, Tatum and Brown. And Baylor Shireman only helps them because he's a proven ready now player who will be in the NBA for sure. So I really like the pick. I'm gonna give him an A-. We're going to skip over the Brooklyn Nets. They didn't make any picks because they don't have any, so nothing for them. I kind of want to give them an F, though. I might as well. Here, we'll just scroll up here. Brooklyn Nets, NAF. Your team, you're rebuilding. You did a good job with the Mikal Bridges trade. I thought that was good. I'll talk about a lot of this stuff on the podcast that I have. Go check that out, Stoneheart Sports Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, I think they just get an F because they're a young team and they should get young players. But they're looking for 2025 draft, which looks really good. So not really a big deal there. But then the Charlotte Hornets are here, and they gave them an A-. I think it's a little generous, to be honest. They probably had the first shocker pick, I would say, with Tijan Salon, also out of France. And I gave that like a volatile B-. Again, it was a major shocker at the time, but it's not insanely crazy just because this draft wasn't like, oh my God, you got to take this guy at this spot or whatever. But it seems like they were looking at trading down, but then I kind of feel like they probably could have just done that if they wanted and still got their guy. But maybe there were no offers. We don't really know, but it seemed like it was possible for them to trade down. But he's one of, if not the biggest boomer bust prospects, especially when you draft him at number 6. And he's, got good size, similar to Riza Shea, 6'9", 203. He's very young though. He's 18, going on 19. So he'll be 19 years old when the season starts. One of the youngest players drafted this season. And he's a great athlete, and he used it to his advantage to finish and play defense. So that's really good, and he was better shooting this year, but it's not very consistent or at a high rate. It's just the more I think about it, the more I'm not super against it as a fan of the Hornets. A- I think is a lot, but when I was talking with different people when it happened, obviously everyone was really upset, and they were like, oh, whatever. But I kind of moved my grade up a little bit more as I kind of thought about it. And that's because, it's not a top-heavy class. It's more deep. And if you have this pick, if you have no plans to compete next year, why not take a risk at a guy here and look at the 2025 class, which is supposed to be really good, and still have some sort of, ceiling in terms of like, hey, he's probably not going to help us a ton right now. So we stick with a very similar team that we have, and then it's going to obviously prohibit us from getting better while other teams are getting better. Then our draft odds can go lower, and 2025 is when we strike, get a high pick, get a great player, and boom, go with LaMelo, go with Brandon Miller. LaMelo would probably be his like year of like, hey, you got to prove it if we want to pay you, or I think, he's probably already going to get paid. But if we really want to say, hey, you're our guy, we're not going to trade you. Brandon Miller would be finishing up his second year. Mark Williams, will you actually stay healthy for a season? Who knows? And then go after from 2025 to actually try and compete. So I don't hate it. I don't hate it. It's just, is there a possibility that the 6th overall pick is just wasted? Yeah, there is. So that's the only thing there. And then they got KJ Simpson, which I kind of thought was good. He showed a good amount. He's a bit undersized as a guard, but he was great scoring in the Pac-12. So I do think that he's just probably one of the better, if not the best, point guard in that conference last year for Colorado. So I like it. Why not take a chance? We have a lot of guards in the room because they got Nick Smith last year, who I thought was really good. So kind of be a little crowded, but why not? We'll see what he does. But I'll give the overall grade a B-. Again, it's hard to grade because it was a big boomer bust pick, but it's kind of going on the potential. Potentially gives them a better pick next year. And I just say let them play it out this year. Let the young guys roll. The pick doesn't help them, to where I just think if they drafted a guy that would have helped them right now, it would help them get to like the 10 seed, which they've already been, and get annihilated in the play-in game. Like, don't do that. Go ahead. You need one more big piece. So go ahead, take the boomer bust guy, and he's not going to produce right now, and then you might get a higher pick next year. And then if this guy does produce, boom, you got a great roster. So not a big deal. I'll just give him a B- for now, which is like the baseline, like, hey, not insane, not bad, just because I don't want to jump to conclusions for anything. Next is the Chicago Bulls, and they just got one guy. It was Matas Buzelis, and I gave it an A. I really liked him, and I thought 11. I'm kind of surprised he fell that far, but it's just really good value with upside. So that's pretty great for them. He's 6'9", 200 pounds, 20 years old, can basically play anywhere. G League was where he was at, which was a rough situation. It was kind of a rough situation over there, especially the coaching, and they kind of just be like, hey, go do whatever. But he showed a lot in kind of spurts and has a ton of upside to be able to play and kind of just really do anything on the floor. The only thing is the passing was poor, and the handling in terms of just game to game was not as good as expected. But in the I don't think it was the celebrity game, but some kind of all-star weekend thing, he was a part of a team, and he ended up doing really well against younger guys, but guys that are in the NBA, and he showed out to be pretty well. So that kind of had my hopes going up a little bit. I think, the shooting was not great in G League, but it was good in high school. So maybe G League just kind of took it down a little bit. It was more so due to just the coaching and the environment being like, hey, just let it fly, go do whatever. So that's probably why. But I'm going to give it an A- overall, just because they didn't get anyone else. So while the pick is an A, I'm going to just bump it down a little bit because, they didn't get anyone else, and they need to rebuild. They just need to. Do it for the 2025 draft. This upcoming season, whether it's at the deadline or before or just during the offseason, go ahead and just trade your players. Just trade them if you can. Vucevic, DeRozan, and Zach LaVine, if you can do that. And just rebuild. Just rebuild for 2025. Get a high 2025 pick. And, you got lucky with Matas falling here, which I think is, great for them, and he could be a good player. But just rebuild, please. Please, Chicago. You're not going to do anything. Just rebuild. You have to do it. But either way, just for the draft, I'll bump it down to an A- a bit just because I wish they got another young player in here, and I just think they need to do it. The Cleveland Cavaliers only ended up drafting one player, and that was Jalen Tyson out of Cal, and I kind of gave it like a C plus, at least just that first round pick. It was really hard to kind of place how I feel about him. He was kind of force fed the ball at Cal, but he obviously did good. He can dribble at 6'5", 216. He shot 36% from three, which, hey, it's, good. He kind of does a lot of bully ball with a lot of his handling. That's kind of his forte. He's an active rebounder, which is good. It's just passing was an issue. He had a 3 assist to 3 turnover ratio, which obviously just cancels out to 1. And the defense wasn't really there. And I think keeping up with NBA athletes is going to definitely be an issue. So that does concern me a little bit as to how much upside he really has. But maybe he could kind of help him off the bench for a few years under his rookie deal. But they also ended up, for the Summer League, got DJ Burns. They signed him. So, hey, that's good. I kind of hope – I didn't think he would be picked. I was hoping maybe at the end someone would shock us and be like, oh, there he is. But no, they ended up picking him. But he'll be in the Summer League, so I'm for sure going to watch the Summer League. There's going to be a lot of guys that were in the tournament that kind of went out, especially on NC State, that are going to go in the Summer League. So, that's kind of the only thing they have, but he's not on the roster officially. We don't really know, but I think just thought it was kind of cool to throw that out there for DJ Burns. But overall, grade is probably a C just because it was only Tyson. I think he could be good. I'm just not a huge fan at number 20. And hey, maybe Burns stays to the roster. If he does, maybe this grade probably stay at a C+, but kind of one of the lower grades from the draft, I would say, is from the Cavs. Mavs just had a second round pick. Took Melvin Ajinka. Pretty, solid. That's fine. Don't have a ton to say about him. They kind of moved up. Just draft and stash guys. I would have really liked someone for right now, though. To be honest, I think a lot of win now teams use the draft to get guys that are just going to immensely help their bench. And the Mavs couldn't do that, so it was kind of disappointing. But I think they just traded Tim Hardaway Jr., I just saw, to the Pistons or something like that. So they got a bunch of picks there, and maybe that opens up cap space for them to do something else. Who knows? So they'll probably improve through free agency, but would have liked to see at least one player that could maybe help their bench right now. So we'll just give it a B-. It's fine. Next is the Denver Nuggets. They ended up taking Deron Holmes. They traded up to get Deron Holmes out of Dayton. I gave that pick specifically a B+. They traded up from 28. They gave up 3 other second-round picks, which is a lot, but they needed a big guy off the bench. Their bench was kind of the reason, or part of the reason, that they, I think, lost in that series. Not all of it, but it was there. And, I'd say Christian Braun was kind of the only guy that was really like, oh, yeah, this guy did good. So, and other than him, a lot of the guys that were off the bench are kind of forwards or guards. So, Deron Holmes is like a center/forward. And I think, the only one they had in the, backing up Jokic was like DeAndre Jordan in terms of just actual centers. So definitely needed someone there. He's a great shot blocker, 6'9", 230 pounds. He's got a 7-foot wingspan. Actually shot well for a big man from all phases of the court. And he can play the 4 or the 5. So I thought that was a pretty good pick. I agree with the B+. But they also got 2 undrafted free agents that I think they're on 2-way deals, but I think at least one of them is probably going to help out the team, and that's point guard Trey Alexander from Creighton and for the power forward/center PJ Hall out of Clemson. And I think both of those are great and really good pickups. They're experienced contributors that could potentially help out right now, and that's a big deal for the Nuggets because that was kind of the case for them of what they needed. It's a lot of experienced guys that can help right now. So that moves my personal grade for them up to an A- because they were able to get Trey Alexander and PJ Hall in undrafted free agency. And we'll see if they keep them. I think at least one of them they're going to keep. And I think at least one of them is probably going to play some minutes in the playoffs next year. I think that's a pretty big pickup for them. Next is the Pistons. And it seems like Yahoo really did not particularly love the Ron Holland pick. I had him ranked higher than other people. I know he was not ranked as high, at number 5 by a lot of others. I thought he was around there, but it's as high as I thought he would have or should have gone. So this is definitely the ceiling of what I was like, okay, this is where I think he could or should go. But it's not a bad pick. I just don't think it is. He's 6'6", almost 200 pounds. He's 19 years old, so young, obviously. And he's kind of like a larger combo guard. He's a good defender, rebounder, great athlete, electric when driving. That's kind of his biggest thing. It's just the shooting is not really fully there. But I'm going to give it I gave it a B just because I just believe and like the player. But I just can't give it too much higher because he's just not too far from a lot of players they have, like Ausar Thompson, who they just drafted. So it'd be really weird how they fit together because they just have so many guys on that team, so many young guys. I feel like at some point, some of them just won't be able to play as much minutes as they should and might fall out of the rotation. And I don't really know who that's going to be when, we get to it. But I still believe in the player. And then in the second round, they got Bobby Klintman, who I think is a good pick for them. He's a developmental forward who could have gone in the first round. So I think that's pretty good. But, overall, probably a B, B-, somewhere around there. Again, I liked Ron. Just the fit is kind of and then Bobby was a good pick where he fell. Just fine. It's solid. But they're also a team that's looking into 2025.
Hey, next is the Warriors. I messed up in the video. I thought that the Warriors did not get Quentin Post because I thought he was going to the Thunder, and I didn't pick up that there was a trade, and I saw a bunch of different stuff from different sites or whatever. Seems like he's going to the Warriors, and they did make that draft pick, so I'll just add this in instead. It's pretty quick. I like it. He's good. He's old, probably one of the oldest prospects being picked in the draft. He's like 24, but he's a 7-footer, not too beefy. He's like 240 pounds, but he's got like a 7'2" wingspan, and he's a good catch and shoot threat in terms of a big man, and he can space the floor, and it's pretty good. He shot 43% from three, which is obviously very good. He was great at Boston College, kind of carried that team even though they had nothing else with them. Still a good player that went I believe sometime in the second round for them. So yeah, that's good. If I had to give him a grade, it was probably like a B. Solid. Nice. Back to the video.
And then we can end up moving to the Rockets, where they have them at an A. And I thought that they did pretty good. They took Reed Sheppard, number 3 overall, who's, a valuable guard, obviously. 6'2", 182, so he's a little bit lighter and shorter. He is 20 years old, so he's not as young as you would think. But he can shoot, he can defend, he can pass. He's good for, I think, he's perfect for the Rockets because he's good for a team that's young but is still looking to win. He's young but is still ready to play right now. The Rockets were 23rd in 3-point percentage, so Reed Sheppard's going to help that a ton. It'll be very interesting, I think, to see how the lineup works. I don't expect him to start at all, especially not his rookie year, but maybe in the future he can. I just would have liked for them to maybe look into trading for a ready now player. Hey, we want to win right now. We were almost there. Our young guys, they're going to take the step up now. But it potentially wasn't there. So that's fine. I understand it. And then they got N'Faly Dante as an undrafted free agent on a 2-way deal who could have been drafted. He's a center from Oregon. So I thought that was pretty good as well. So I'll give it a B+. Only Reed is why, but they did get Dante. They have a lot of guys though, so it would have really been hard to kind of add more young talent, but maybe they could have had at least one kind of guy that's not fully playing but is still young that they can develop, or maybe be hey, we traded this to help us win right now, but all that'll probably come in free agency. But Reed Sheppard, was he the third best player? Maybe. I kind of was not as high as others, but not as low as some others. I was kind of right in the middle, but I think he's a good prospect, and I have no problem with him going at 3. I just kind of want to see how they're going to use him, how much he's going to play, because I think he's a valuable guard for a team that can win right now. So actually, I'll move this up to an A-. I'll move it up to an A-. Just stick with what I had graded for the pick. So yeah, good for the Rockets. Got a good player. I'm really excited to see what they do this upcoming season. Then we have the Kings of the second round, and that is the Indiana Pacers. They ended up walking away with 3 second-round players, starting with Johnny Furphy, which basically could have been a first-round pick. Really don't know why he fell this far. I think people, I guess, shied away just by his lack of experience, and he didn't do a ton or play a ton. But he's got really good upside, so why not? I think he definitely could have easily been a first-round pick and probably should have. So him going 35, that's great value for them. And then they got Tristan Newton and Enrique Freeman, who are both good second-round picks, and I think one of them could pan out, at least one. So I think this is just a pretty great job by the Pacers taking advantage of the value that they had to its fullest extent, and that's a great job. So I'm going to give them an A. I know it says B here, but I think you could view Furphy as a potential first-round pick, and then Newton and Freeman are both kind of older prospects, and they want to win right now, so I think one of them could definitely help out at least. So that's basically exactly what you want to come out of in a draft when you're a win now team. A guy who can help you right now, and a guy who can kind of go on the bench, learn, and maybe in a year or two be even better than the guy that you draft in the second round to help you right now. That's basically perfect. So I'm going to give them an A. I love the Pacers draft. And then next one's pretty quick. It was the Clippers. They ended up getting Cam Christie. They gave it a B+. I agree. I'm going to give it a B+. He's a good young guy. He's got very high upside with his pretty big size, and he shot really well at Minnesota. He is the brother of Max Christie on the Lakers, and I think Cam Christie is a better prospect than Max Christie, and that's what I'm saying. This class is deep. It's really deep with a lot of guys, and the top heavy, it wasn't really top heavy, but it had a ton of potential players that could do something, especially going into the second round. So I think this is a good pick for the Clippers. Just they're in their own kind of situation right now in terms of what they're dealing with. But hey, at least you got maybe a guy who could end up being pretty good in the future and maybe be a low-tier starter / a good bench player. So pretty good pick for them. We'll give it a B+ as well. Then we have the Los Angeles Lakers, and they got Dalton Knecht at 17. I gave that an A+. Just that pick specifically. It's the best value in the draft, in my opinion. I just cannot believe that they got him at that spot. He only fell due to his age, basically at 23 years old, which, I mean, that's just purely based on how teams feel about drafting players and kind of what state they're in anyways. Like, if they're not in a winning state, they don't want to draft a winning now player, but if they are, they do. So, hey, why not? And there were other players that are ready to play right now that were just a little bit younger, but I think Knecht is better than them in terms of just what he can be in the NBA. He was one of my favorite players in college basketball last year. He's such a polished finisher, can go left or right. I mean, multiple times you just see him do you're like, that's an NBA player. Just the way he went by his layups, never messed up. Super smart offensively, amazing shooter. Literally was so crazy just watching some of his games. He just caught heat on an instant so many times. He's not small. He's 6'5", 212 pounds. He's a liability on defense a bit, and we'll need to get used to kind of being better or being a more consistent defender and playing against better and more consistent defenders, because I think a lot of the times, sometimes he'd be matched up against a guard and it'd be good, but when he goes against a team like Kansas, he shot, I think, like 4 for 17, and I remember watching that game, and I think the Ringer in their draft guide kind of brought it up as well, of like, hey, he played this game against really lengthy Kansas NBA, like frames and kind of struggled. So I think he's going to have to learn and practice kind of getting a shot above a lot of those guys, but the talent just doesn't go away. Like, it just doesn't. And then obviously the biggest story, which was Bronny James going to 55. Everyone has their opinions about it. Again, I think it's cool for the first time that you'll see a father-son play together. Obviously every dad would love to see that, so that's great for them. Is it nepotism? Yes, obviously it happens, it does, but I think the people that are purely hating on it are in the wrong, but the people that are purely defending it are in the wrong as well. I think they both are. If you think just in the middle, it's like, yes, it is nepotism. Does it happen in the NBA and in sports? Yes, it does. It's hard to really avoid. But was he the 55th best player, or was he worthy of being taken at this spot? Did he take a spot from another player? The answer is no, and he probably did take another spot, and he was not really worth that pick. But again, it happens. It happens. And I think that's why the NBA has opened up a lot of stuff. And I think it's good they have for two-way contracts, summer league, extended rosters. The guys will prove themselves. They will. And I think when you have the cachet of a LeBron James, it's kind of what you get to do. You kind of get this privilege of doing that. But I don't have as big of a problem with it, to be honest. But it is a fact that he was not obviously, fit to be in this specific spot. But it's 55. It's fine. Not really the biggest, craziest deal in the world. And then they got Blake Hinson, forward out of Pitt, as a UDFA, which is good. And they also got another Wolfpack. Mohamed Diarra is going to play for them in the summer league, who's a tall forward. He was the one practicing Ramadan during the tournament, ACC tournament, and part of the NCAA tournament. And he's a good lengthy defender who can kind of finish. His shooting needs work, but he tries it. He attempts a lot of threes, and he makes some of them. So if he can get the three down, he definitely would have been a 100% drafted player. And he's not too old. He's pretty young. I think he's like 20 or something like that. So good draft for them. But overall, I think they get an A. Steal of the class. I like Blake Hinson, and then Bronny happened. But hey, he might have some good upside as like a bench guard in like 2 to 3 years. So if you can stay and develop with them with new coach JJ Redick, then I think this wouldn't really be that bad of a pick. It's just maybe he could have waited and come out. But again, you've heard the story before a million times. No need to get too much into it now. But one of the best drafts for sure, especially because of Connect. So we'll give him an A. Next is the Memphis Grizzlies. This one's very controversial. A lot of people had them as one of the worst drafts. A lot of people were like, what are you talking about? I'm on the latter. I don't know. I think people just had the Grizzlies lower because they hate Zach Edey and they thought he sucked. And he's just a big guy. That's basically why. I view Edey higher than a lot of people because I'm not biased and I actually watch the games all the time. Only Wemby and Boban rival his size. He's 7'4", I think a little bit under 300 pounds. He has a 7'11" wingspan, and he's 22 years old. So yes, he is older, and it's weird that he went this high. But he has great post moves. He's not just some kind of tall bozo. Like, he knows what he's doing in the paint. He has great touch around the basket. He doesn't just dunk all the time. He does a great job spinning and moving and fading. He's smart. He did not foul a lot or foul out because he avoided fouls. If you just watch the game, a lot of times they would grab him and try and rough him up a lot, and that was kind of the plan. Like when the 16 seed beat them, the plan was to be like, hey, let Edey do his thing, try and rough him up a bit, because the other guys can't do anything. The reason they went to the Final Four is because Edey stepped up his game and be like, okay, I'm going to get a little bit more athletic and be a little bit better in terms of like, hey, this is not the time to foul, or I could just stand here and do this. This is the positioning I need to go into. Like, I need to be able to stay on the court and, obviously practice on my, fade shots or whatever. But the other players actually made shots. Like, they went from one of the worst three-point shooting teams to one of the best. So that's why Purdue ended up doing so well. Not because Edey, was suddenly like, oh my God, he's getting all these calls all the time and they're suddenly winning all these games. Like, no, that was not the case. You didn't watch basketball, basically. Just say you didn't. But he's immediately going to be a top tier rebounder, rim protector, and screener. He just needs to learn to be more aggressive. Sometimes, in my opinion, I think he's a little too passive because he's worried about fouling out. Now he doesn't need to do that because he's not going to play the entire game. He does not have a perimeter game, and in transition, he's going to be a liability. But I think, the shooting, apparently he was shooting a lot farther at the combine, so maybe that could be something he improves there. I don't think it's impossible, especially when he has great touch. I don't think someone like that is just totally inept to the fact that maybe they could develop a longer range shot. Like, look at a guy like Brook Lopez. The Brooklyn Nets or New Jersey Nets Brook Lopez is nowhere close to the same player as the Milwaukee Bucks Brook Lopez. Very different players because they changed their style. So I think it's definitely possible. But he can just rebound and go give it to Ja and just run up and down. Like, they can get in times where they can avoid having this transition run back and forth game. And even if they do, they have the athletic players, the Grizzlies do, to be able to make up for it. And they want to win right now. They want to win right now. Edey's a win now player, and in the playoffs, I think the reliability is going to be super valued. He only missed one game in I think the past 2 years that he's played. And the Grizzlies were the second worst 2-point shooting percentage team. So they did not really make a lot of shots inside. And as much as people just focus on the 3 ball, you can't just shoot threes the entire game and win. That's just not how it works. You got to change up, make defenders come inside, get other 3-pointers open. And they were basically a non-factor from anywhere that's not the 3-point line. And even from the 3-point line, they were whatever. So I think Edey helps that a ton. And they were 23rd in total rebounding. So Edey's going to help that obviously a ton. So I think people are just kind of blowing out of proportion, like the number. Oh, he went 9th instead of 15th. Like, okay. What? These players are so varied. They needed a center to be able to be there. He's going to be a good NBA player. Is he going to be an all-star? No, probably not. But he's going to be a good NBA player. He just is for however long, even if he's older. So it's not a bad pick, especially in this draft class. And then the second round, they got Jalen Wells, who is solid. And then Cam Spencer, who's also solid. I think both of them are good. Jalen Wells, I believe, is out of Washington State. He's like a wing/forward. Washington State had a shocking year. They ended up making the tournament, and he was a pretty big part of that. He came on late at the end of the season, super young. So that's a young developmental guy they have. And then Cam Spencer, he was one of the guards that started the white guard on UConn, who is pretty good. He's a good player, kind of obviously a low ceiling, but hey, why not? He might end up helping you out potentially, and you want to win right now. So I give them a B+ all around. I'm higher on Edey than others. They needed a center. It's not some insane, oh my gosh, wow pick, but it's not a C. It's just not. We're going to look back and be like, okay, that was a poor grade for sure. Anyone grading it like an F, I saw a D, just terrible. They just hate Edey. It's the bias taking out of their actual ability to, analyze basketball or analyze sports. Just take that out of it. I give it a B+, even if it's not exactly there. It's not a bad grade. It's just not. Next is the Miami Heat. They ended up getting Kel'el Ware out of Indiana, young center. I give it like a B/B+. I think it was fine. It wasn't bad. I would have liked to maybe see other players or positions, but it's not like a big deal. They did not have a real backup big at all, so they definitely needed one here. 6'11", 230 pounds, so he's pretty light for a big, but he's 20 years old. But the reason he's pretty light and the reason he got picked this high is because he can stretch and shoot the 3. So that's kind of his upside. He's a great athlete, but he had issues with coaching before, moved different colleges, had the potential effort concerns is what was brought up, and kind of had some poor decisions a lot, like when he's had the ball. Like if he knows he's not one-on-one with a player and he's just gonna be able to shoot over them or be able to score, if he's not be like, hey, no one's coming to help, he would kind of like make a lot of bad passes or decisions or shots. So that's gonna be something to work on. But if there was any team better to be like, hey, this guy has some coaching kind of malpractices or not, that's a bad kind of phrase, but kind of just issues with potential coaching and stuff like that, Heat culture is a pretty good place to go. So I think that's a pretty good spot for him. And then they got Pele Larson, just a good 3-and-D wing from Arizona. I thought that was a good pick. And then Keyshawn Johnson, also out of Arizona, I really liked as well. I thought that was a good pick. They ended up they didn't pick him, but they signed him as an undrafted free agent. I'm surprised he didn't get picked, so I kind of really like that as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and give them a B+/A-, somewhere around there. Probably leaning a little bit more towards B+, but we'll keep it kind of right in the middle. Not super too far either way, but it was solid draft for the Heat. Next is the Bucks, and they had a very interesting draft. I think you could honestly flip their second and first round pick, and it'd seem more realistic. They ended up getting AJ Johnson, which I didn't see him going round 1 anywhere in any sort of mock draft. And he's got a long way to go, basically, before he's any sort of meaningful contributor in the NBA. He's 6'4" with a 6'9" wingspan. He's a good dribbler, but he's only 167 pounds. I'm really skinny. I'm a skinny person, and I weigh more than that, so that's pretty crazy. I'm obviously not 6'4" with a 6'9" wingspan, but for NBA terms, that's pretty light. And he only shot 27% from 3. His assist to turnover ratio is 0.8 to 0.7, so pretty bad. And I don't think it's bad for the Bucks to take a developmental guy, but at 23 and maybe a different guy, like, or take him in the second round and get a guy who can help right now, like, I gave it like a D. I think it was for sure the worst pick in the first round. Did not love it. But then they got Tyler Smith at 33, which is great. A great pick. They totally should have taken him at 23. And if you want AJ Johnson at 33, sure, whatever. Like, I think my perception of their draft is like, okay, just look at the players they got, even if the order is like weird. And you probably still give it like a B or a B minus, somewhere around there. I'm going to bump it up a little bit to a B just because I think it was saved by Tyler Smith. I'm really high on him. I really like him. I think if you flip it, again, this is kind of what it is, and you just go by the players, and I'm really high on him. I think he has a ton of upside. He can do a ton of stuff. He showed a lot in the G League. He didn't play a ton, but I just really like his upside, and I think they really could have had so much of a better draft if they got like Tyler Smith at 23 and just got one of the NBA ready now guys at 33, like Tyler Kolek or someone like that. I think that just would have been so much better, but whatever, that's fine. B minus, B, somewhere around there. They saved it by Tyler Smith. If not, this would have been for sure the worst draft by a team. Next is the Timberwolves, and they definitely had one of the better or best drafts of the night. They ended up trading up to number 8 as the Spurs took Rob Dillingham and the Timberwolves traded for it. San Antonio gets the 2031 first round pick from Minnesota, and they get a 2030 swap from Minnesota. So really, I was kind of shocked that the Timberwolves traded up here, but San Antonio, I guess they know an 8th grader in the area that's going to end up going and being some kind of great NBA player. But, maybe it's a good pick. I don't want to, crap on him, but it is kind of weird seeing the 8th pick traded for such a late round pick. But like we said, this draft was not as high as others. It was more deep. So, I guess that's kind of the value that these GMs and scouts placed on these kind of picks. But I think the pick overall for the Timberwolves is better than it would be for the Spurs. So I think it's great for them. I think they get like an A minus for this pick. They add a scoring guard to the bench, which Nickeil Alexander-Walker was like the only one they had, and he averaged 8 points per game on 44% field goal percentage, which is fine, but like could be better. They have zero cap space, absolutely none. So if they would have been able to improve the team, it would have had to been just naturally through players improving or through the draft, which they for sure did. I think it's great that they got this just bucket getting guy off the bench. I think kind of like a Lou Williams type. That's kind of what Rob Dillingham's going to be. He's improving as a passer, which is good. The reason he's probably not going to start or be a good starter is because he's only 6'1", 170 pounds or something like that. Again, really light. But his finishing in college, like, it was there, but it still concerns you of him being so light, of like with bigger defenders, like, is it still going to translate his finishing ability? I don't really know, but he's still a good shooter. So that's still going to be there. And the offense for the Timberwolves was 16th in basically every metric. So this would definitely raise it for sure. And it's also going to be raised for sure because of the next guy, and that's Terrence Shannon Jr. From Illinois, which he had kind of a crazy draft, just system overall, or just like road so far. The player itself, he's a ready now guard. He's super tough and just really good at getting to the basket. He's 6'6", 220, 24 years old, so he's much older. But he had these rape accusations that was going on while the season was happening. He sued and ended up getting reinstated and went to trial and was freed from verdict. So ended up, apparently not being a false accusation. And now he's apparently all good, but his draft stock kind of went down, and then after that it slowly had to go back up, but I think they got him at a pretty good price here. He's a bigger NBA ready wing / guard who can handle and score on the inside. He's 6'6", 220, good defender. He's an inconsistent shooter, but I think it's a great draft pairing with Rob Dillingham. They wanted to get more kind of guards to be able to be on their team, because they do have a lot of big, lengthy defending forwards, and that's kind of what the team was with Ant. Obviously, they got Mike Conley too, who's a good playmaker, but Rob Dillingham is going to be the bench scorer, and I think Terrence Shannon could be the bench driver in terms of Rob Dillingham shooting and Terrence Shannon driving, and he's also bigger and probably is a better defender, whereas Rob Dillingham is probably more finesse and a better scorer in general. So I thought it was great. They really improved their team, and I think they get an A. They got 2 great contributors right now, and they have a very high salary, like they said, so they would have had to improve through the draft, and they did. So very good Minnesota. They are definitely trying to be on pace to go ahead and contend for the title, but for the draft specifically, I agree. I think they did a good job. I'll give them an A. The Pelicans are up next. They had a little bit of a quiet draft, but it was still pretty solid. They got Yves Mises out of Baylor, which I gave that pick around a B, which I think is fair. He's a young, lengthy rim defender / lob threat. He's 6'11", only 230 pounds, but he's got a 7-foot wingspan, and he's 19 years old, so he's really young. And he's kind of raw. He hasn't really played a ton of basketball in general, but he probably won't ever really be a shooter, but he can still develop, I think, as a post scorer. But he seems to be like the replacement for Jonas Valanciunas, who's older and I think only has 1 year left or is a free agent right now. I'm not 100% sure. But it's going to be weird having these 2 lob threats, and we're going to see if they maybe work offensively, obviously with Zion Williamson. But Zion Williamson can definitely handle the ball, so I'm sure they'll have workarounds for that. But I think it's a good pick. They needed a center. They drafted one. He needs to be developed, obviously, but he's got good upside. He's a great athlete. So a lot of the Baylor players, in my opinion, as well, I think, it's kind of like a Kentucky, Kansas effect. Like, they're being coached. They're going to the NBA with the right mindset. So I think that's pretty good. Solid pick for them. And then they got Antonio Reeves, the guard / wing out of Kentucky. And I thought that was a pretty good pick too. He might end up, I think it's a good flyer, take a flyer on a guard who might end up helping and being a good scorer off the bench, potentially. So just solid B, I would say. Mises, again, hasn't played a ton. Reeves could be a good bench scorer. We'll see. But that's what second round picks, you kind of got to see. But it's a deeper draft, like I said. So, quiet but solid B for the Pelicans. Next is the New York Knicks. And man, they have had a very busy just week in general, with a lot of this just trades and extensions and signings they've made, and now the trades in the draft. But they started off with Pacome Diaté, which another Frenchman, and I give that like a B-, which is kind of my thing for I don't hate it, I don't love it. Hey, whatever, fine, good. I think they are taking a developmental swing, which, hey, that's totally fine. I had a higher rank for it because they had 2 first-round picks. I was like, okay, what are they going to do with one of the first-round picks? But then they ended up, trading one of them. So the pick itself, when I made it, I was like, oh, this is a B-. But now I moved it up to a B, just that specific Pacome Diaté pick, because of what happened in the second round. And, we'll get to that. But for Pacome, he's 6'8", 217, and 18 years old. So pretty good measurables there. He's a pull-up threat in terms of his potential. That was kind of his thing in France. He shot efficiently. He's just not a great defender and kind of light. But when he has the ball, he's just kind of really zeroed in on scoring. So you kind of know he's trying to score, and you kind of try and know majority of the time where he's going. So that's going to be something he's going to need to mix up, and he's just going to need to be a better passer because he's a poor passer right now. So those 2 things don't really equal success, but that's why he's a developmental upside swing, because of his pull-up ability and him being 6'8". And then at 34, the Knicks got Tyler Kolek, which was a total steal. Probably the second best or third best value behind Dalton Knecht in the draft, in my opinion. He's a taller, older guard, great playmaker, going to be a very good playmaker already. I think he was one of the best playmakers in this class, and he's still a good scorer as well. I think the report that came out was BS, but apparently it was because he was historically low on some kind of IQ test or something, and was an idiot or whatever. Apparently it was debunked or something like that. I don't know. I remember seeing that. I don't think that's the reason he fell. I think teams just didn't like the older players. But still a great pick for them. He can help out the team. I don't know how much he'll play because the Knicks have a ton of players on the team. But again, they're going to be starving for cap space because they have just signed a ton of guys. They're bringing basically the Villanova squad there. So good pick there. And then they got Kevin McCullough, who fell kind of, I'm not sure why he fell so far, probably because of age. But he's a solid wing bench player, so I think that's a good pick for them. So I'm going to give them like a minus is kind of what I've decided on. I think Kolek's a great pick. He contributes now. I'm not sure how much time he's going to get, though, at least this next season. And then they got, Diate, who's a developmental guy. At least Kolek or McCullough, one of them is probably going to help play. So that kind of helped move the grade up for me. Next is the Thunder. They ended up getting Nikola Topic, one of the, 4 Nikolas in the NBA, or maybe 5 now. I thought it was a good pick. I gave it like a B+. He's the best passer in the class, bar none, for sure. But he's not really a ready now guy, which is kind of weird because I think the Thunder would have gotten a guy that's ready right now. But I get it. I understand. He's 6'6", 203, 19 years old. They felt the need to take someone like this because, they're so young, and I think they really want to take the great upside. So I don't want to knock them for it at all. Again, best passer and probably one of the best ball handlers in the class. He's, issue is shooting. It's very iffy, but it's there. It's not like he's incapable of shooting. Like, he can do it. It's just he's not gonna be taking a lot of threes or shots in the game. He can score on the drive. That's kind of his main ability in terms of offensive scoring. But he does have a knee injury, which is probably going to be expected for, him to not play a ton his rookie year, which, hey, that's fine. Thunder have, they don't need him obviously right now. And when he comes back, I think he's only going to add to the Thunder's young talent. So I really like it. I think it's a good pick. And then they ended up getting Dylan Jones out of Weber State, which I liked. And I was like, I think this is going to be a good second-round pick. But I didn't think he would go 26. So I think that was a little bit of a reach. I'm kind of shocked they traded up specifically to get him. But they do love like smaller school guys. And Dylan was great last year. He's 6'5", 237. He's a little bit bigger than I would love. But he's got a 6'11" wingspan. And he is 22 years old, so he's a little bit older. But he's a creative ball handler and scorer. He can't really keep up defensively, though, so that's kind of the issue. And he did not shoot as good as you would like from 3, but still not bad, 32%. It's just obviously he wasn't facing the defenders in terms of just being able to close out like all these other players were while he was at Weber State. But it seemed high. It seems a little high for me. And then in the second round, they ended up getting Ajay, I think it's Ajay Mitchell, which is fine. I wasn't as big of a fan, but whatever. It's a second-round pick. And then I'm going to assume they got Quentin Post because I saw a post, ironically, about that. And he was a good forward and center, a big man out of Boston College. He's around, I think, a 7-footer who can stretch the floor. Kind of similar to PJ Hall, but he was a good ACC player. So I think that's a fine second-round pick. And then they also, for the Summer League, picked up Jack Golke, who, if you watch the tournament, he was the shooter from Oakland, the white shooter who just lit it up and knocked out Kentucky and almost knocked out NC State in the games that they played in the tournament from Oakland. So I think, hey, that's a pretty cool pick. See what he does in the Summer League. But I'm gonna give him a B or B+. I'll give him a B+, just barely. Again, a bit disappointed from what they could have had, just because I think the Dylan Jones pick was high. But it's still a solid class, and I think very highly of Nikola Topic. So I think he can come in at least in maybe 2025 and be maybe a starting point guard for them just because of his phenomenal playmaking ability. So I think it's not a bad class. So I'll give it a B+. Next is the Orlando Magic, and they only ended up getting one player, and that was Tristan da Silva. And I give it an A-. I actually liked it. I think he's versatile. He can fit anywhere. He's 6'8", 217 pounds. He is older, though. He's 23 years old, from Colorado. But he can stretch the floor. He shot 40% from 3 last year on 5 attempts per game, so got a lot of attempts and was consistently shooting it well from 3. He's a good passer. He's just not an athlete, but he's not a poor defender at all because he's lengthy. So it's not like he's going to get blown by on defense all the time. Like, he's tall, lengthy. He's just not an athlete, but he's not like a scrub defensively. Like, he can still defend. And the Magic want to win, so I think this is a good fit. Jonathan Isaac, who they have, is more of like just a pure defender, and he's a little bit bigger and lengthier, but he's not the scorer that De Silva is, and I think he also has like 1 or 2 years left on his deal. Mo Wagner is kind of the only other bench big that they have, and he's just like a pure center, but they don't really have like a bigger wing / forward for like Mo Wagner, or not Mo Wagner, for Franz Wagner, for kind of to help him out, or if he's just not playing super well or needs to come out or isn't performing, which that happened in the playoffs, and you need a similar player who's not as much of an athlete but definitely a little bit of a better shooter, and that's De Silva. And I think I had him going to the Suns. I thought the Suns would have been an amazing pick if they got him, but other teams really liked him as well, and I think this is around where he should have gone. So I think it's a good pick. I like it. Good for the Magic. They didn't get anyone else, so I'll keep it an A-, but I like it. Good for the Magic. Next is the 76ers, and I did really like their draft as well. They ended up getting Jared McCain at 16, and then Adem Bona at 41, the center out of UCLA. Starting with Jared McCain, I thought it was a good pick. A- is what I had. Probably the best shooter in the class. Philly was around 18th to 20th in three-point efficiency, so he'll definitely help out there. He is undersized, but he's not crazy undersized. He's 6'2", 203, so the height is definitely undersized, but we've seen great shooters be like 6'2", 6'3", all that stuff. But he's a capable defender. He's not a scrub defensively. He's definitely capable, but he's probably going to have to do a lot in order to finish consistently just because of his size. But we did see that in college. He had a lot of like just really crazy finishes, like, oh, that was a great finish by McCain. So I think it's definitely possible for him to do that, especially playing at Duke. He's gone against a lot of the bigger, lengthier guys. But he shot like 41% from 3. So that's like pretty great for a team that doesn't need but would like some extra shooting help aside from just, Tyrese Maxey. So I think that's great. He can pull up or just catch and shoot. He can do either one. So I thought it was a great fit and really good pick for them. And he'd probably be a good bench player. And then they got Adem Bona, who is going to be a backup center for them. And they don't really have a backup center fully for Embiid right now, at least developmental wise. So I think this is good. Go ahead and get him there. He's got some good upside. And then they also signed Justin Edwards as a free agent forward from, I believe, Kentucky. And I thought that was pretty good as well. So I'm going to give him an A. I agree. 2 good contributors right now, both with upside. They're not just like capped right now. Like Adem Bona is experienced with some potential upside still, who's a pretty good athlete and a good shot blocker. He's obviously not Joel Embiid or nothing close to that, but I think he can still help out. And that's what this team's trying to do. So if they can add PG-13, look out. This might be a much improved team. But I really like their draft. I thought it was an A. Good job. Next is the Phoenix Suns. And it seems like they weren't big fans of their draft. They ended up getting Ryan Dunn out of Virginia and then Oso Ighodaro out of Marquette. I didn't think it was a bad draft for the Suns. I think Ryan Dunn is the best defender in the class, but he's just really poor offensive player for NBA standards. Obviously, I think they wanted to target defense, clearly, by the Ryan Dunn pick. Definitely a help come playoff time for sure with their older scorers that they have, to be able to have Ryan Dunn, who's just going to be able to be like, hey, go get the best scorer on their team. Seems like they fully believe in the offense to carry them, and they wanted to focus on defensive help, which their offensive rating was 9th. Defensive rating was 13th. So yeah, technically helped the defense up a little bit. I still think they could have used a little more offensive help though. They ended up getting Oso Ighodaro, who is a good offensive big man as well. So I think that raises it a tiny bit for them, at least in terms of bench scoring, because they just needed a lot of just help from other players. And Bradley Beal was obviously very disappointing, but I still think their bench was just not good. So Ryan Dunn will help a ton defensively. Oso Ighodaro will help a solid amount on both sides. Nothing crazy like that. But I thought it was like a B+. I thought it was good. Got much needed bench players. Would have liked to see more offense, but it's not. Oso is a good offensive player. They both will probably play. So yeah, I didn't think it was bad. I give them a B+. Next is the Trailblazers, and they only ended up getting one player, and that was at 7. They stuck and got Donovan Clingan, which I think is good. I agree, B+. I didn't think he should have gone top 3, and he didn't. I just know there was a lot of rumors like that, so I think this is much better value for them. He's 7'2", 282 pounds with a 7'7" wingspan, and he is 20 years old. The fit is interesting though. That's why I bump it down a little bit. I think, obviously they have a ton of guards, so that was definitely like, hey, don't draft a guard right here. But they also have a good amount of like just pure centers, so maybe a forward would have been better for them, I think. But they did go BPA on their board, which is totally fine. They're rebuilding. I get that. The Blazers were bottom 4 in terms of blocks per 100 possessions, so Donovan Clingan will 100% help with that because he's going to be a good rim defender, and he definitely has more upside than guys like Zach Edey in terms of offensively as a player. I think he's probably going to be similar to some kind of like a Walker Kessler. Some people had Gobert comparisons. I don't think he's like that, but maybe just like a real good starter. But they do have Ayton and Robert Williams. So I assume one of them is probably going to be gone after at least a year. And each of them are under contract for 2 years. So we'll kind of see what happens there. But I'll give it a B+. I wanted to go lower because it was only one person, but it's fine because Clingan is a good prospect. But someone else is on that roster for the Blazers. I wouldn't be surprised if they're probably gone. It's probably Robert Williams is out of here. And even then, Clingan would be, or I guess one of them would play power forward and they'd go big, or one of them would come off the bench or something like that. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out. I hope it's not like a Clint Capella, Onyeka Okongwu situation with the Hawks. I kind of hope that's not what happens, but it's possible. So we'll see. Still good player for Trailblazers. They get a B+. Next is the Kings. They also only got one player, Devin Carter. They have an A. I have an A. Totally agree. Just great value that adds to a team that really wants to try and compete and make noise in the playoffs and had a very disappointing season this past year. Devin Carter had a great year for Providence. Providence, I think their presumed best player going into the season got injured for the whole year. Devin Carter had to step in, and he totally took off and did a great job. He is a great finisher, just knows all the possible moves. He gives all effort on both sides of the court. You can totally see it if you just watch the games. You're like, that's a player I want on my team for sure. Active rebounder as well. He shot 37% from 3 on 6 attempts per game. So I think that's pretty good, especially when you have the 6 attempts per game. He apparently, I watched as well, does have a bit of a weird form, but it's still good, I would say. And he's only 6'2", but he's almost 6'9" in wingspan, and he's 190 pounds. So he's good weight, great wingspan. He is smaller. This is just going to be a very good player for them, a good guard for them, and I think it's an A. I think it's a steal. And again, I was Halliburton the 13th pick as well, or something. He was definitely around this pick. I'm not saying he's going to be Halliburton, but just another good point guard pick that they got at this slot from a one-off school in terms of players, not always like not a blue blood school like a Duke or something like that, like Providence. Just very good pick for the Kings. They got Carter, and they was like, all right, we're done. That's what we got. So I like it. Definitely agree. A grade for them. Then we have the San Antonio Spurs. They give them an A. I give them an A-. I do love the Stephon Castle pick. I think it was really good. He's 6'5", 210, 20 years old. I thought he was definitely a top 3 player in the class. He has very high upside. He's a bigger guard, great defender, very young. Just needs to work on shooting. That's basically it. And you would kind of hope he'd be a better playmaker for Wemby. But I think it's just glad that they got a high upside guard. And I think he can improve in a ton of ways. He didn't start to play a ton with UConn in the beginning, but then he earned his way to being a starter and playing a ton on a team that was just focused on winning now. So I think that says a ton about him, even just being a ready now player. So I have very high expectations, and I think he's going to be really good. And then they ended up like trading a ton, and they got Castle, which I think is good, but they traded a lot, and they got some guys that would be like, oh, that's a good pick for them, and then they would trade it, be like, oh, okay, I guess. And then the second round, they got Juan Nunez, which is fine. And then they got Harrison Ingram out of North Carolina, who's like a wing forward, and I thought that was a really good pick. I think he's going to be a good bench player. But I love the Castle upside, and the second round was nothing crazy, but Harrison Ingram is probably going to contribute in some kind of way and just be a bench player for a good amount of years. So I think that's still a good pick at 48. So I go ahead and give them an A- for their grade. But they also, an A. I'll give them an A for their grade because I do like the Harrison Ingram pickup. And they also ended up getting another Wolfpack in DJ Horn. DJ Horn for the Summer League specifically is going to go ahead, and he ended up signing with the San Antonio Spurs. So that's pretty cool for him and a lot of the Wolfpack guys that end up going into the NBA. So we'll see how that goes. But pretty good draft for the Spurs, and they also are still going to be looking ahead potentially to 2025. But I wouldn't be surprised if Wemby kind of carries them to more wins than they expect. But just for the draft specifically, I thought it was good. Good job, San Antonio. You got, I think, the right player at 4. So we'll give them an A. Next is the Raptors, and they did a ton in this draft, and I thought they ended up doing a very good job. Start off with Jacoby Walter from Baylor. I thought it was a good pick. I gave it like a B+. He's like a guard/wing, good scorer and defender off the bench. He adds shooting that they desperately needed. They were bottom 3 in 3-point percentage, the Raptors were, and 3-point field goals made. He's not really like an ISO guy or like an ISO handler, and in terms of passing, that's not really his thing either. But he's got a 6'10 wingspan at 6'5", so he can defend, he can shoot. Boom, they needed that. Perfect for them. Then they got Jonathan Magobo, who I think it was at the beginning of the second round, which the more that the draft led up and the more I read about him, the more I just really liked him. He's a very sneaky prospect that I got to at the end, but I just really like. He's 6'6", 217 pounds, 7'2" wingspan. He's 22 years old. He'll be 23 at the start of the year. But he's a very versatile defender, can literally switch on anybody. He's a good playmaker too. He's a good playmaker, not despite his size, just like overall in general, just a good playmaker. And he averaged 14 points and 14 rebounds. So obviously rebounding is a big strength of his as well. So I think that's a great pick. And then Jamal Shead was awesome as well. They got him, the guard from Houston. That was a guy I talked about a ton. This is literally Jose Alvarado. This is who this is. Maybe a little bit of a better offensive player Jamal Shead is, but coming from Houston, he knows how to play defense for sure. And I think this is a great pick for them. He's older. Jonathan Magobo and Jamal Shead are both a little bit older, but they're just good players. And I think the Raptors are thinking that they're like doing a hybrid mini reset rebuild, because they do have Scotty Barnes, who's good and made an all-star, and they signed Emmanuel Quickly, RJ. So I think they're young and trying to still win. So I think they did a good job of getting younger guys like Walter, but older guys like the other two I just said. And then they got Ulrich, which he's from the NBA Africa Academy, the first player ever to be drafted from there, and is the youngest player in this draft class. So just draft and stash guy, boom, if they keep him on the roster. So they basically hit every single point of like, hey, a young guy who has potential to develop and helps us with what we need. 2 guys that are a guard forward who can help out right now and do different stuff, both good defenders, both lengthy, and then a guy who's just a center who's a draft and stash who has high upside. Like, literally hit every single thing. I'm gonna give him an A just because Walter, I think at 19, if they got someone else, I think that was maybe like even higher upside, I would have been like, oh my gosh, like this is perfect. But they just got a lot of good guys. No one like crazy, so I'll keep it at an A. But I think obviously not all of them will probably live up to the expectations, but the amount, if you have enough tickets, you might end up winning or striking out and getting the lottery. And I think that's kind of what their idea was. If we have enough players here that we pick all at different spots that we like, I think it'll end up being like, hey, this guy ended up hitting, so that's great. So I think that's a good strategy. But yeah, I liked it. I think they did a good job. So very good job, Toronto Raptors. I'll give you an A. Next is the Utah Jazz, and they had a very interesting draft as well. Stayed at number 10, got Cody Williams, which is good. I gave it a B. I'm just not as high on Cody Williams as others, but I still think this was a good pick for them. He's got size and upside. 6'6" or 6'7", somewhere around there. 180 pounds. He was a little bit lighter, but he's got a 7'1" wingspan, 20 years old. He can really handle good for his size. Great defensive upside. Didn't shoot threes a ton, but was not bad when he shot him. And he's really thin and not really aggressive. So I'll have to work on that. And he had more turnovers than assists. So for someone who had the ball in their hands a lot, that's not great. But it's still he's a developmental player slightly, so still good upside out of Colorado. Then they got Isaiah Collier, point guard out of USC, and he was one of my guys as well. And I just think this is such good value at number 29. He is a little bit smaller. He's 6'2", 205, 20 years old. But I'm a fan. I get the downsides, though, but I am a fan. He's a bulldozer when driving. He's a very good defender. He flashed shooting upside. He's just not consistent with a lot of it, but that's kind of the thing. A lot of these young players, they're not consistent, and then they boom, get it together, and they're consistent. He did have poor turnovers, so he's going to need to work on that. He's not a crazy athlete. He's kind of undersized, but he showed so many flashes at USC, and the USC program was just like crazy with all this stuff. And Collier was the number 1 recruit according to ESPN going into the season. And just him falling to 29, I think was very shocking because he's young. He'll be 20 at the start of the season. So I think, why not? It's pick 29. Go ahead. It's like, hey, sure. So I think that's a great pick. And then we get to Kyle Filipowski, which this is going to be a story. This was shocking that he fell this far. I'm not as high on him as others. I still think it's good value for him. Just the pick itself, he's a good ball handler and scorer for a big man. His wingspan is the same as his height, so that's kind of not ideal. And I don't think he's as good as advertised, but I still think second round pick, yeah, sure. But apparently, he did not have great interviews because people were asking him certain stuff. He also didn't have good workouts physically in general, but he didn't have good interviews. And there's apparently a story going around about his girlfriend, in that his girlfriend is much older than him and has basically been grooming him and has forced him to cut off all contact with his parents and his siblings, his family. And they talked about it on Twitter or X or whatever. And she's a Mormon and was basically grooming this kid. And apparently stuff got out where she was his babysitter when he was 14 or something like that, or 12. And she was in 2018, she graduated from Alabama, this girl. And in 2022, Kyle Filipowski, she went with him to his senior prom in high school. So 2018, this girl graduates college. Fast forward 4 years, Kyle Filipowski, the one that she is with, goes to his high school senior prom. So very weird. Apparently Duke kept it in-house a ton, and the coaching staff just kept it in-house, and they really did a good job because no one had any clue. And she was around apparently the facility a weird amount of times, or kind of just weirdly, around there a lot. And apparently he just was not great in the interviews when they were asking him questions about it. And it turned a lot of teams off, and they just took him off his board. And yeah, so it's a very weird and it just kind of situation. And of all teams, the Utah Jazz in Utah go ahead and take him in the second round. And it just like the story, right? It's just crazy. It's a crazy story. It's so crazy. I don't have any opinions on it. I just wanted to get the story out there for those of you that didn't know. So just very odd, but just the pick itself at 32, it's a good pick. Why not? Who cares? It's a second round pick. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. Very interested. But then they also got two undrafted guys, Max Asmus, who, if you remember, if you watched the tournament, not this most recent one, but even before then, Oral Roberts, remember when they upset, I believe it was Ohio State, and like made it to the Sweet 16 or won just the first round. He was the star guard on that team, and then he went to Texas last year and was pretty good. He ended up signing as an undrafted free agent to the Jazz, and they also got Armando Bacot, who's the big man from UNC that was there for a while, and he's going to play in the Summer League. So pretty good pickups there. Overall, I would say an A- as well. I agree. I think, it's a good continuation for their rebuild. I'm not as high on Cody, but it's still not a bad pick. Collier's a steal. Not as high on Kyle, but it's still good value, but we'll see with that situation. And then they had good undrafted pickups. So we'll go ahead and give them an A- for that pick. And then we will end it off with the Utah Jazz, with the Washington Wizards, who had 3 first-round picks. And I'm going to go ahead and go with, I have an A here. I'm going to switch it. I don't think I had an A+ for any team. We'll have the Wizards an A+. I'll give them an A+ there, just because I think they did a good job getting value for the players. Starting up with Alex Sarr, I think this was the number 1 player in the class in my opinion. He's probably not going to be the best, but I think if you're going number 1, you're like, okay, he has upside, he can play right now. Why not go ahead and get him? He is 7 foot, 224 pounds, 19 years old. I think he's going to translate as a good defender. He's more of like a third option on a very good team. He will fit right in with what Washington needs for sure. He'll be good. He'll be good. It's just how good. All-star, All-NBA. I'd say like a low-tier All-star caliber player is his peak, but still he could reach like a 1 or 2-time All-star for sure. I could totally see that. And then at 14, they got Bub Carrington, who was one of my guys in this class for sure. I love that he rose up. Just totally one of my guys. Only 19 years old. He's 6'4", 195 pounds, 6'8" wingspan. He turns 19 in July, so he's very recent 19. He's 18 right now. He just gets buckets. He gets buckets, but he's like bigger in terms of his size, and he has more rebounding and passing upside. So I think it's just as a prospect is like really good. He had a triple-double in his very first college game at Pitt. His very first college game as a freshman had a triple-double. His pull-up game is awesome. He didn't shoot crazy from 3. He was more of a mid-range player, but I still think he can still develop that. But if he can work on like spot-up threes, he's going to be totally dangerous, and this is going to be an amazing pick. I am very, very high on Bub Carrington. I think he's a stud. I watched him a ton. Watched him in person at Pitt while I was at NC State. He's a stud. He's very good. He was very hard to deal with. And then they also got Keyshawn George, which was a good pick. I gave it like a B or a B+. It's a good pick. He's a shooter. He's 6'7", 209, 20 years old. So he's a bigger kind of a guard/wing. But 70% of his shots were threes. And he shot 41% from 3. So pretty good. He just didn't play a ton in college. So there's not a ton of sample size to go off there. But Washington shot kind of around the middle for 3-point attempts per game. But they were in like the mid-20s for 3-point percentage. So if George works out, he's definitely going to help a ton. And they didn't have a lot of bench shooting last year or just scoring in general. So George is going to step in and do that already. And so I'm going to move it up to an A+ because they added a ton. And I'm not sure if any of these guys will reach great heights, but they all have good potential. They're all young, and they all play different roles. Like Bub Carrington's can kind of do it all, but he's not. The only thing that lacks is really his 3-point shooting or his like defense. Obviously, Alex Sarr, he can score from the outside, but more slightly inside, but he can still shoot for sure. Obviously, an amazing defender, got great size, good athlete. And then George is a taller, like 3-point shooter. who's a guard slash wing, who can also learn to be able to defend because he's 6'7" and 209 and a good athlete. So I think this is it's a great start to the rebuild. They just need one more draft to really get the stud that's good they're going to build around. And, then they're maybe on a good path. So I loved it. I'll give them the only A+ of the class. So good job, Washington. And that'll do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Go ahead and leave a like. Go ahead and leave a comment what your favorite or least favorite pick was, or what you agree or disagree with in terms of grades. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll be getting podcast stuff out. Again, Stonehard Sports Podcast. That's what I first started doing. If you like podcasts, go ahead and listen. I'll have a podcast out in the next maybe 2 days or so, or day. Just wanted to wait for like the NBA Finals and NHL Finals and NBA Draft to all finish. And then on this channel, we're going to be doing Division Dive-In series, and I am putting a ton of work into it, and I'm going to go through basically just in-depth of every team and kind of going through what their expectations are next season, because we're in the downtime for a lot of the season for sports. So podcast stuff will kind of keep going, but keep an eye out for the Division Dive-In series that's on this channel. And then if you like gaming, I have a gaming channel, SHG. You can just look that up. Just look up SHG, like Smash Bros, Overwatch, or whatever. I play some of those games. I might have another video out. It takes a long time to get those out. But if you like that stuff, go ahead and check it out. If not, it's fine. Totally whatever. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.